We would like to develop the phasor diagram of a transformer. Actually, we would first develop the phasor diagram of an ideal transformer. So, in this particular video lecture, we will make an attempt to derive the phasor diagram of an ideal transformer. Now, this particular video lecture can be taken to be the continuation of my earlier video lecture, which was titled as which was titled as magnetic circuit of transformer at load. So for this particular video lecture, it is always recommended that the viewer is first gone through the earlier video lecture, which is titled as magnetic circuit of transformer at load. So I am continuing from where I have ended in my previous video lecture. So in my previous video lecture, I have derived this particular equation, N1 into Im equals to N1 I1 minus N2 I2. Now what I would like to again emphasize here is that whenever we are writing small case letter or small letters, that means small I1, small I2 or small Im, then we are actually implying the instantaneous value. So this small I1 means the instantaneous value of current which is drawn by the primary winding of this transformer. Likewise, small I2 means the instantaneous value of current which is flowing through the secondary winding of this transformer. So small case letter or small letters simply convey the meaning that they are representing the instantaneous value, that is value which is changing with time. So this small Im is representing the magnetizing current which is drawn by the primary winding of transformer, and this small Im is the instantaneous value of the magnetizing current. That means it will change with time, it is a function of time. To be precise, since we have applied a sinusoidal voltage source with the primary winding of the transformer, since we have applied a sinusoidal voltage source with the primary winding of a transformer, the quantities which will be there in this transformer, they will be varying or they will be changing in a sinusoidal way. That means applied voltage V1 is sinusoidal, so current flowing through the primary coil P will be sinusoidal. So the mutual flux phi which is confined in the magnetic core of the transformer will be also sinusoidal. So induced EMF E2 in the secondary coil will be also sinusoidal. So the current which is flowing through the secondary coil due to the induced EMF E2 in the secondary coil will be also sinusoidal. That means I2 will be also sinusoidal. So in short, we say that the quantities, the physical quantities like the magnetic flux or the current or the induced EMF, these all quantities are assumed to be sinusoidally varying quantities. So we may again have a look over here, this equation which we have derived in our previous video lecture, which is titled as magnetic circuit of transformer at load. That is N1 Im means magnetizing MMF equals to N1 I1 minus N2 I2. That is the difference of primary MMF and secondary MMF. Obviously the voltage source is connected with the primary winding. So since voltage source is connected with the primary winding, so we will expect that the primary MMF will have an upper hand compared to the secondary MMF. That means that the primary MMF will have two components. One component of primary MMF is taking care to cancel or neutralize the demagnetizing effect of secondary MMF, and the other component of primary MMF is used for setting up the magnetic flux, that is the mutual flux in the transformer magnetic core. So primary MMF can be thought of to be comprising of two components. One component is the magnetizing MMF, which is needed for establishing the mutual flux, which is established through the transformer magnetic core. So that MMF is termed as magnetizing MMF, and there will be another component of primary MMF which will take care to neutralize or cancel the demagnetizing MMF of secondary winding, that is N2I2. So that's what it is written here, that difference of primary MMF, that is N1I1 and N2I2, will be equal to the magnetizing MMF, because the current carried by the primary coil P at loaded condition was assumed to be I1, and current carried by the primary coil P at no load condition, that means when the secondary is carrying no current, that means when the switch SW is open, at that time the current drawn by the primary winding at no load condition from the supply voltage was Im, assumed to be Im, that is the magnetizing current. Now, since we are saying that all the quantities are sinusoidally varying quantities, so they are changing in a sinusoidal way, so we can write the equation which is written over here in terms of root mean square value. Over here Im is the instantaneous value of the magnetizing current, I1, small I1 is the instantaneous value of current carried by the primary coil P, small I2 is the instantaneous value of current carried by the secondary coil S. So since these are changing in a sinusoidal way, we have rewritten this equation which was written on the basis of instantaneous value. Actually this particular equation is written on the basis of instantaneous value. So we have replaced this equation by this equation where we are using the RMS value, that means the root mean square value of all the quantities, like the magnetizing current is replaced by capital Im, and capital Im is indicating the RMS value, that is the root mean square value of the magnetizing current. Likewise capital I1 and capital I2 are representing the root mean square value, that is the RMS value of the primary and secondary winding current respectively. So we have written this equation on that basis that the quantities are changing in a sinusoidal way. So why not replace the equation which is involving the instantaneous values of the quantity by those values which are the RMS values for those corresponding quantities. Like small Im is replaced by capital Im, that means instantaneous value of magnetizing current has been replaced by root mean square value of magnetizing current. The same thing goes for small I1 and capital I1 and small I2 and capital I2, that we are replacing the instantaneous values of the quantity by their corresponding root mean square value or the RMS value for those quantities, since the quantities are changing in a sinusoidal way. Now before we proceed with the phasor diagram of an ideal transformer, of course we will be only focusing on developing the phasor diagram of an ideal transformer at no load condition. That means we will assume the switch SW is open. So if the switch SW is open, then current cannot circulate in the secondary winding, so that means I2 will be absent, so there is no current in the secondary winding. So we say this condition is the no load condition. So before we do that, let us again think, or let me just state in brief that when we have derived this particular equation in our previous lecture, we had made some assumptions. What are those assumptions? Let us once more elaborate. Those assumptions were that it was assumed that the primary coil and the secondary coil are having no resistance. Let's say these primary winding and secondary winding will be made up of some conducting material like aluminum or copper. Most of the cases it is usually copper. So that winding is made of some conducting material like copper or aluminum. So in that case you will expect some resistance will be present in those primary and secondary coils. But for an ideal transformer, we assume that the primary and secondary coil are having no resistance. The second assumption which we have made while deriving this particular equation was that there is no leakage flux. So if there is no leakage flux, that means all the flux are confined in the magnetic core of the transformer. Although if you look this diagram closely, then you will find that I have indicated one leakage flux termed as phi L1. Phi L1 stands for the primary leakage flux. L stands for leakage, and subscript 1 is associated because it is related to the primary side. It is one subscript is present because it is related to the primary side of the transformer. So this is your phi L1, means primary leakage flux. So this primary leakage flux, although I have shown here or indicated here, but for an ideal transformer, as far as an ideal transformer is concerned, for an ideal transformer, we will assume there are no leakage fluxes. There are no leakage fluxes. That means if there is no leakage flux, then whatever magnetic flux has been produced or established, whatever magnetic flux has been set up, or whatever magnetic flux has been established, they are confined totally inside the magnetic core of the transformer. That means the path of the mutual flux will be along this magnetic core of the transformer. So all the flux are actually mutual flux. There is no leakage flux. This is the second assumption for an ideal transformer which we have made while making this derivation in our previous lecture titled as magnetic circuit of transformer at load. Now what is the third assumption? The third assumption is that there are no magnetic losses. Magnetic losses means namely your eddy current loss and hysteresis loss. So we are assuming that there is no eddy current loss, there is no hysteresis loss taking place in the magnetic core of the transformer. So this is our third assumption, that there is no eddy current loss, there is no hysteresis loss taking place in the magnetic core of the transformer. Although we should keep in mind that the nature of the flux through the magnetic core of the transformer is alternating in nature, or it is changing in a sinusoidal way, because we have applied sinusoidal voltage. Sinusoidal voltage will give rise to sinusoidal current through the primary coil P, and the sinusoidal current through the primary coil P will set up a flux through the magnetic core which is alternating in nature or which is sinusoidally varying in nature. So we could expect some magnetic losses in the transformer magnetic core, but for an ideal transformer we are assuming that there is no eddy current loss, there is no hysteresis loss taking place in the magnetic core of the transformer. So this is our third assumption. What is the fourth assumption? Fourth assumption is that there is no magnetic saturation of the transformer magnetic core. So the transformer magnetic core is never going to get saturated. So that means we are assuming that transformer is made of such kind of magnetic material. We are assuming that this transformer, of course we are saying all these things for an ideal transformer. Unfortunately, ideal transformer do exist only in books and copies and pens, and of course in our imagination. So it is a figment of imagination. Your ideal transformer do not exist in actual practice, but nevertheless we start learning the working of a transformer from an ideal transformer. Then we go on removing the idealities, or then we go on removing the assumption which we have made for an ideal transformer one by one, so as to arrive at the real picture or the true picture of a real transformer. So in this way it is found to be convenient. So what we do, we first make an assumption which are only valid for an ideal transformer. Although ideal transformer do not exist, they only exist in our imagination, but we learn the working of an ideal transformer, and then we go on removing the assumptions which we have made for an ideal transformer one by one. Then we are moving close to the real or the actual transformer. So we are able to understand the working on the operating principle of a real transformer. So what I was saying is that although the alternating flux is there in the transformer magnetic core, so the one should expect that there will be some eddy current loss and hysteresis loss taking place in the magnetic core of the transformer. But for an ideal transformer, we are assuming there are no magnetic losses, or I mean to say there is no eddy current loss or there is no hysteresis loss in the transformer magnetic core. This was our third assumption. The fourth assumption was that the magnetic core of the transformer is never going to get saturated. That means what? The value of the relative permeability mu r, the value of the relative permeability mu r for the magnetic material from which the magnetic core of the transformer has been built up, that magnetic material is having a value of relative permeability mu r from which we are constructing the transformer magnetic core. The magnetic material having relative permeability mu r is always going to be a constant. That means the value of relative permeability mu r will not change. It will always remain constant. This is our fourth assumption, that for an ideal transformer there is no magnetic saturation occurring. Whatever may be the value of the mutual flux phi, the value of the mutual flux phi can increase up to any extent, whatever extent. But no matter what, whatever be the value, how hard, how large or how high can be the value of the magnetic flux phi through the transformer core, the core of the transformer will not get saturated. That means the value of the relative permeability mu r will always be held at a constant value. This is our fourth assumption. So you allow me to just write in brief so that it is there that the assumptions of an ideal transformer. Let me write it so that we are getting the opportunity to revise once more, because these assumptions whatever we are making for an ideal transformer will be removed one after another, and then we will arrive at the true picture of a practical transformer. So we are saying that the first assumption is that primary and secondary coil, I am writing coil, you may write windings also. So primary and secondary coils has got no resistance. So this is our first assumption, no resistance. Second assumption is that there are no leakage fluxes. There are no leakage fluxes, or you may write this thing in a different way. There are no leakage flux, or the magnetic lines of flux, the magnetic lines of flux is confined, let's say magnetic lines of flux are confined totally inside the magnetic core of the transformer, inside the magnetic core. So this is our second assumption. The third assumption is that there is no, let's say there are no eddy current loss, and hysteresis loss. There are no eddy current loss and hysteresis loss in magnetic core of the transformer. So this is our third assumption in magnetic core. Now what is our fourth assumption? Fourth assumption is that the relative permeability, relative permeability of magnetic core what we are meaning, the value of mu r is constant, so this thing can be rewritten as magnetic saturation of transformer core is absent. Magnetic saturation of transformer core is absent. It is you can restate that in this way. So these are the four assumptions which are made for an ideal transformer. So I like to add one point is that in some of the textbook, besides this, they also use the assumption that the value of the relative permeability of the magnetic core mu r tends to infinity. So I will include that point in our discussion later on, and consequently we will see that what is the effect of including that assumption, that for an ideal transformer the relative permeability of the magnetic core, that is mu r, tends to infinity. I will include this assumption during the later part of my discussion, and subsequently we will see what is the effect of adding on this further assumption that for an ideal transformer the value of the relative permeability of magnetic core mu r, for an ideal transformer the value of the relative permeability of magnetic core, that is mu r, tends to infinity. We will add up this later on and see what is the consequence of that. Now let us rewrite some equations quickly, which was already derived in our previous lecture titled as magnetic circuit of transformer at load. Why I am rewriting those equations? So that you can find a ready reference, because when we develop the phasor diagram of transformer, then we will be using certain conclusions on the, and those conclusions actually are based on the derivations which have been done earlier. So just to make you aware and familiar and provide a ready reference, I am writing in quick succession. We have assumed that flux phi, I mean to say the instantaneous value of the mutual flux which is passing through the magnetic core of the transformer, is given as phi equals to phi max sin omega t. This was our thing which we have assumed, because it is changing in a sinusoidal way. So since the mutual flux which is passing through the magnetic core of the transformer is changing in a sinusoidal way, so we can always write phi equal to phi max sin omega t. Then from Faraday's law of electromagnetic induction, and also including the effect of Lenge's law, also in both including the Faraday's law of electromagnetic induction as well as including the effect of Lenge's law, we have written this equation that EMF induced in the primary winding P is given by small e1, that means instantaneous value minus n1 into ddt of phi, and also we have said accordingly for EMF induced in the secondary coil of the transformer, that is small e2, instantaneous value was equals to minus n2 into ddt of phi. So if you just make a small bit of calculation by putting up the value of phi, then you will find that E1 was coming as N1 into omega into phi max into sine of omega t minus pi by 2, and likewise you will find that for E2 you will get the expression N2 into omega into phi max into sine of omega t minus pi by 2. So These derivations we have already done earlier in our previous lecture. So over here, what is actually omega? Omega is nothing but omega is your angular supply frequency. So omega can be simply written as twice pi into f. So this is your angular supply frequency omega in electrical radian per second, and this is your frequency in hertz. So 2 pi f is omega. So we have derived this equation in our earlier lecture. Now what else I have said in our earlier lecture is that if you just consider the primary coil P, so we can model the EMF induced in the primary coil P by a voltage source, because both EMF is being induced in the primary coil as well as the secondary coil. So we can replace the primary coil by a voltage source. Likewise, we can replace the secondary coil by a voltage source, because if we are only concerned with the voltage and current from the circuit point of view, then the primary coil P is having its induced EMF E1. So the primary coil P can be thought of as a seat of EMF E1. Likewise, there is a induced EMF in the secondary coil S. So secondary coil S can be thought of as an seat of induced EMF E2. So if you just consider the primary coil P, then for primary coil P we can actually draw this particular thing, that the applied voltage V1 and the EMF induced in the EMF induced in the primary coil P, EMF induced in the primary coil P, they can be represented in this particular way. That applied voltage V1 and E1 are like this. So this is my applied voltage V1 and this is your EMF induced in the primary coil P, because we are taking the primary coil P as a source of EMF, seat of EMF. So now as per Lenge's law, E1 should oppose V1. So if this is plus, then this should be also plus, because E1 will be opposing V1 as per Lenge's law. Now while drawing this thing we have made two assumptions. What are the two assumptions? Let me write in quick succession those two assumptions. Number one is that primary coil P, number one is primary winding has no resistance, So we are assuming primary winding has got no resistance. Otherwise, there would have been some voltage drop, resistive voltage drop in the coil. So that should have been included in this circuit model, which has been drawn for the primary coil P and the applied voltage V. What was the second assumption which we have made while doing? There is no leakage flux. There is no leakage flux. So this is our second assumption, that we are assuming that all the magnetic lines of flux are confined in the transformer magnetic core. No lines of flux are straying away or taking another path. All the lines of flux are taking the path which is confined in the magnetic core of the transformer. So we are actually making these two assumptions when we are representing this thing by this equivalent circuit, that the applied voltage V1 is going to be opposed by induced EMF E1 in the primary coil P. EMF induced in the primary coil P is E1. So we are drawing this equivalent circuit on these two assumptions. Primary winding has no resistance, and the second is that there is no leakage flux. So this leakage flux phi L1 is assumed to be absent when we are drawing this particular equivalent circuit. So from this particular equivalent circuit, what can we say? We can simply say this thing, that, let me erase this, we can simply say that applied voltage V1 and E1, they are equal in magnitude, but they are 180 degree out of phase. Why they are 180 degree out of phase? Because you see, as per Lenge's law, E1 will oppose V1. So from that point of view, V1 can be written as, or rather the opposite of this thing will be like this. So this particular thing is the phasor representation of this one. So this one is the phasor representation of this particular representation which I have done. So let me indicated. So this is nothing but this is the phasor, this is the phasor representation. This is the phasor representation. Okay, so this is the phasor representation of this one, that applied voltage V1 and E1, they will be such that induced EMF E1 will always oppose V1. So that thing is represented in phasor form in this one. So you see this minus sign over here is indicating only one thing, that these two voltages are 180 degree out of phase. They are 180 degree out of phase. So that means if this is having positive peak, then this will be having negative peak, like that. Anyway, the phasor representation is like that. V1 is the 180 degree out of phase of E1. Now there are some argument actually. People do give some argument. The argument is also very much reasonable. Is that in the phasor diagram, some people, they don't like to indicate V1 and E1 180 degree out of phase. So what is the logic behind this? The logic is that when we are drawing a time phasor diagram, so there we are just indicating that what is the time instant of the maximum value which is occurring for different quantities. So that being the line of argument, in some of the book you may find that V1 and E1, they are not indicated 180 degree out of phase. So that is also there, but you allow me to take this approach where which thing I am talking about. I am saying that the induced EMF in the primary coil P will oppose the applied voltage V1 as per Lenge's law, and that thing is represented by giving a minus sign in front of E1 in the phasor representation. So I am taking this particular approach. Just that thing is being represented here, that the induced EMF in the primary coil P will oppose the applied voltage V1. So just to indicate that the induced EMF in the primary coil P will oppose the applied voltage V1, in the phasor representation a minus sign is indicated. Okay, now keeping these things in view, we will keep this thing in view, and we will also utilize this information when we draw the phasor diagram. For example, you see the EMF induced in the primary and secondary coil E1 and E2 respectively, they are having an expression which is indicating that they are lagging the flux by 90 degree, because you see in the expression of flux it is only sin omega t, but in the expression of induced EMF E1 it is omega t minus pi by 2, that means omega t minus 90 degree. Also in the expression of E2 it is omega t minus pi by 2, that means omega t minus 90. So we say that the induced EMF E1 and E2 will lag the flux by 90 degree. Now one thing you can always make out is that if you compare the expression of E1 and E2, then you see that all the terms are same except for N1 and N2. So if secondary coil has got large number of turns, so N2 will be higher, so in that case E2 will be higher. In case the secondary winding has got less number of turns, so N2 will be lesser, then E2 will be lesser. So whether E1 will be longer in length or E2 will be longer in length will be decided by the number of turns. Whichever winding will have more number of turns, for that the RMS value of the induced EMF will be also larger. Now let us begin with the phasor diagram, and while drawing this we may write this expression value somewhere so that it can serve as a ready reference. But before that, let me start with the phasor diagram so that we are in the process, because we wanted at the beginning to draw the phasor diagram for an ideal transformer. We have stated the assumptions of ideal transformer. Now how to draw or how to begin with the phasor diagram? So we can begin by choosing some quantity which we will define as our reference quantity. So for drawing a phasor diagram, you have to first select, or rather you have to start drawing the phasor diagram by choosing a reference quantity or the reference phasor. So out of these various quantity, now please remember that we are doing it for no load condition. That means our phasor diagram which will be drawn right now will be for an ideal transformer, and that too at no load condition. So we are drawing the phasor diagram of an ideal transformer and that too at no load condition. So you allow me to take mutual flux phi, which is established through the magnetic core of the transformer, as our reference phasor. That means I will start drawing the phasor diagram by drawing phi, where phi is nothing but the reference phasor. So this is phi, the reference phasor. Now why I have chosen the mutual flux phi as the reference phasor? Because it is that physical quantity, the mutual flux phi is that physical quantity which is related to both the primary side as well as the secondary side. We can easily view here that the mutual flux phi is linking both the primary coil as well as the secondary coil. So mutual flux phi is that physical quantity which is relating both the primary quantity as well as the secondary quantity. Okay, so this is our reference flux reference phasor, that is mutual flux phi. Now where should we draw Im? Because you see, again I am saying we are drawing the phasor diagram at no load condition, and that too for an ideal transformer. So at no load condition, what is the current drawn by the primary winding from the supply voltage? It is Im, that is the magnetizing current. Now what is the basic logic? That if magnetizing current is more, then flux will be more. If magnetizing current is less, then flux will be less. Or rather, we should not say in this way. Let us take another view, is that if magnetizing current is maximum, that is peak, then the mutual flux phi will be also maximum. If magnetizing current is negative maximum, then the mutual flux phi will be also negative maximum. If magnetizing current is zero, then flux is also zero. Or in short, if you think in terms of two waveform, one waveform is indicating the magnetizing current Im, another waveform is indicating the magnetic flux which is passing through the magnetic core as phi, then we will find that there are two sinusoidal waves, and the positive peak of the two sinusoidal wave as well as the negative peak of the two sinusoidal wave are happening at the same instant. For example, let me draw over here so that we can make out something. Is that, let's say this is our magnetizing current Im. So what about the magnetic flux phi? Magnetic flux phi will be also like this. So this is your magnetic flux phi, and this one is the magnetizing current Im. This is a magnetizing current Im. So we say that if one is maximum, another is maximum. So both are having the positive peak at the same time, negative peak at the same time. So that is what is being indicated. Same time they are having the positive peak, same time they are having the negative peak, same time they are zero. So we say that phi and Im are in same phase. So we will indicate Im over here in same. So this same phase thing means that they are in time phase. They are in time phase. That means if magnetizing current Im is zero, then flux phi is also zero. If magnetizing current Im is positive maximum, then flux phi is also positive maximum. If magnetizing current Im is negative maximum, then flux phi is also negative maximum. Okay, so this thing we have drawn. Now what we can do, we can draw E1 and E2, but before we draw E1 and E2, let me write that expression for E1 and E2 so that we can correlate. I am not writing the instantaneous value, I am writing the RMS value. What was the RMS value of E1? It is root 2 pi N1 into F into phi max, where phi max is the maximum value or the peak value of the mutual flux in the transformer magnetic core. So this was E1, root 2 pi N1 F phi max. What about E2? E2 expression will be also similar. except for one difference, that instead of N1 it will be N2 into phi max. So now, as I was saying earlier, that both E1 and E2 will lag the magnetic flux by 90 degree. So E1 and E2 will lag the magnetic flux by 90 degree both. So I am drawing E1 and E2 with respect to phi, by they are lagging by 90 degree. Let me draw it. So let's say this is our E1 and this is your E2. So allow me to put up some naming so that we are in a better position to communicate. Let's say this is our point O. Let's say this is our point A. This is our C. This is, let's say, B. This is D. So now this being a phasor representation, all the quantities are assumed to be rotating in anti-clockwise direction at an angular frequency of omega, which is given by 2 pi f. Okay. Now, what is OB? OB is shorter in length and OD is longer in length. So from this diagram only we should be able to make out. What should we be able to make out from this diagram? Which one is greater? N2 is greater than N1, isn't it? Because in the phasor representation, the length of the phasor denotes the magnitude of the phasor. So the length of the phasor E1 is OB and the length of the phasor E2 is OD. So since OD is larger than OB, so E2 is greater than E1, so that means N2 is greater than N1. That's what we have written here. So now what we have said in earlier in our lecture, previous lecture, that the applied voltage V1 and the EMF induced in the primary coil P, they will be 180 degree out of phase with respect to the what should I say, with respect to the argument that as per Lenge's law, induced EMF in the primary coil P will oppose the applied voltage V1. So if the induced EMF in the primary coil P is to oppose the applied voltage V1, so V1 and E1 should be 180 degree out of phase. So that what is being indicated here. So let us write V1 indicating here. Let us draw V1. So this will be V1 actually. Let me draw it here. So let us name this as F. So what we are saying, that OF and OB, they are equal in magnitude, but they are 180 degree out of phase, and it is representing V1, the applied voltage V1. So we have said earlier while drawing that thing that V1 and E1 will be 180 degree out of phase, because E1 is the counter EMF, E1 is the counter EMF which is induced in the primary coil P, and E1 opposes the applied voltage V1. So V1 and E1 should be shown to be 180 degree out of phase. So we have drawn this particular diagram also in the previous thing, that applied voltage V1 and E1, they will be 180 degree out of phase. We have drawn this and we have indicated that they will try to oppose each other, isn't it? Each and every instant. So from with respect to that, we are saying they are 180 degree out of phase. Okay. Now they are 180 degree out of phase with respect to each other, but with respect to some external, they are found to be in the same. Na? If you connect some load here with an external circuit, but with respect to each other they are, because you see E1 will try to force current in this direction, and V1 will try to force current in this direction. So they are 180 degree out of phase with respect to that thing, that V1, let me use this thing, V1 will try to force current in this direction, whereas E1 will try to force current in this direction. E1 will try to force current, E1 will try to force current in this direction. So they are trying to force current in the opposite direction. So that's why they are shown to be 180 degree out of phase here. So this is the phasor diagram. Now in case suppose actually by looking at this phasor diagram at the moment, one can always make the conclusion whether it is step up transformer or step down transformer. What we have seen, E1 is E1 which is given by OB, E1 which is given by OB is smaller than E2 which is given by OD. So induced EMF E1 in the primary coil P is less compared to the induced EMF in the secondary coil S which is given by E2. So obviously EMF induced in the secondary coil is more. EMF induced in the secondary coil is more because E2 is more or greater and E1 is lesser. So E1 is lesser and E1 is the EMF induced in the primary coil. E2 is the EMF induced in the secondary coil and it is greater than E1. So it is a case of step up transformer. Step up transformer means voltage is being stepped up. Voltage is being stepped up in the secondary side. So the secondary side is the high voltage side and the primary side is the low voltage side. Because voltage is being stepped up, so primary winding is the low voltage winding and secondary winding is the high voltage winding because E2 is larger than E1. This is one conclusion we can make from this diagram. Now let us add that effect which we are saying now that in some of the textbook besides those four assumptions which we have made for an ideal transformer, the another added assumption which is done is that relative permeability mu r for the magnetic material is assumed to be very large, or to be precise the value of mu r for an ideal transformer tends to infinity. So let us see what is the effect of that over here. So before we see that, let us write one equation which we have derived earlier, but we can again derive it or we may rewrite it. Let's see what can we do is that let us apply Ampere's circuital law for this magnetic circuit which is shown for the transformer at no load condition. So if you apply Ampere's circuital law for this one, so what does Ampere's circuital law says that Ampere's circuital law says that net MMF acting along a closed path equals to the current which is enclosed by that closed path. So this primary coil P is having N1 number of turns. So since the primary coil P is having N1 number of turns, so we will expect N1 number of conductors on this side of the limb and we will expect N1 number of conductors on this side of the limb. So that means on both the side of the limb, we will expect N1 number of conductors. Why N1 number of conductors? Because the number of turns for that winding is N1. So since the number of turns of primary coil P is N1, so there will be N1 number of conductors on this side and this side. What is IM? IM is the current drawn by the primary winding at no load condition. So what is the current enclosed in the closed path C1, C2, C3, C4? It is N1 into IM. So this is the MMF acting in this closed path. Now if you integrate this closed integral H dot dl, this dl is nothing but it is an elemental length along the mean length of the magnetic circuit. This mean length of the magnetic circuit is given by C1, C2, C3, C4. So we are taking an elemental length dl, and elemental length dl is taken along the direction shown by the arrow over here. So elemental length dl is taken along this path. This path which is indicated by C1, C2, C3, C4 is known as the mean path of the magnetic circuit. or mean length of the magnetic circuit denoted by LC. So if you apply that right hand grip rule, so cross and dot, thumb is pointing in the same direction in which you are going on integrating H dot dl by taking this infinitesimal length dl. So we are taking the infinitesimal length dl and we are integrating in the same direction as that of the direction of H. The direction of H is computed from that right hand grip rule, and it is in this direction only, in the direction of the arrow only. So if you integrate, you will get H into LC, and this will be equal to current enclosed. So this is your equals to nothing but current enclosed. This is equal to current enclosed by which path I am talking of? C1. Let me provide a gap, by C1, C2, C3, C4. So how much current is enclosed by the path C1, C2, C3, C4? Obviously it is N1 into Im. So from this only you can write this expression. Let me write it over here. Let me erase this, because we are not requiring the magnetic circuit of the transformer at load condition. We are requiring only at no load condition. So you allow me to erase this. So what can we write further? We can write it further as H into LC, because if you take the summation of all the infinitesimal path, if you take the summation of all the infinitesimal path dl along this complete path C1, C2, C3, C4, then it will be equal to LC only, because what is LC? The mean length of the magnetic circuit. So H into LC equals to current enclosed. What is the current enclosed? It is N1 into Im. Now from this particular thing, what can we write? We can write B, that is magnetic flux density, as mu naught into mu r into H. So from this, what can we do? For H, what can we write? For H, we can write as N1 into Im by LC, isn't it? So we just we are using this particular equation. N1 Im by LC is H. Now what can we write for flux? What can we write for flux? For flux phi we can write as B into A. So for flux we are writing B into A. What is B? Mu naught mu r into H, but for H what we have written? N1 Im by LC into A. Now what can we rewrite this further? Phi equals to N1 into Im divided by 1 by mu naught into mu r into LC by A. What is A? A is nothing but the area of cross section of the magnetic core. So this area of magnetic core, the area of cross section. So we can indicate A by this particular thing. We can indicate A by this particular thing. So this is our A actually. This area is our A. This particular thing, this area is our A. This thing we can point like that. So this is our A. Let me indicate it over here. So this particular thing is our area A. This particular thing is our area A. So now we have written flux equals to N1 Im by this thing, 1 by mu naught mu r into LC by A. So this particular thing is known as reluctance of this magnetic core of the transformer. So what can we write? We can simply write that flux multiplied by reluctance equals to MMF. MMF is nothing but magnetomotive force. So what is this thing? This thing is flux. This particular thing is reluctance, RL. So reluctance symbol is RL, and this is nothing but, this is our MMF, that is magnetomotive force, MMF. So we are writing just from this equation only, flux multiplied by reluctance equals to mmf. Okay, now for an ideal transformer, mu r tends to infinity. Okay, if we include that assumption, for an ideal transformer, for an ideal transformer, mu r tends to infinity. In that case, you look at this particular expression. If mu r tends to infinity, then reluctance will tend to 0. So you just rewrite this, allow me to rewrite this equation so that it is much easier to get the feel what we want to actually make the conclusion. If we assume the relative permeability to as tend to infinity, let me rewrite it. What I am simply writing is that N1 into Im equals to flux phi into reluctance. Now what is reluctance given as? Like reluctance is given as 1 by mu naught mu r into LC divided by A, isn't it? So I think I am keeping this thing inside the bracket. This is the expression we want to focus on right now, that N1 Im equals to flux phi into reluctance 1 by mu naught mu r into LC by A. Now if for an ideal transform mu r tends to infinity, so if mu r tends to infinity, then this reluctance term tends to 0. So we are writing that if mu r tends to infinity, then reluctance tends to 0. What is reluctance? Reluctance is given by this thing, where reluctance is given by 1 by mu naught into mu r, 1 by mu naught into mu r multiplied by LC by A, isn't it? So reluctance RL is nothing but 1 by mu naught mu r into LC by A. So we are writing that thing only, that if mu r tends to infinity, then if mu r tends to infinity, the assumption which is made in some of the textbook for an ideal transformer, that for an ideal transformer the relative permeability of the magnetic material from which the magnetic core is built, that is mu r tends to infinity. So if mu r tends to infinity, then reluctance tends to 0, then this N1 Im also tends to 0. So if for an ideal transform mu r tends to infinity, so what is the immediate effect of this? Reluctance tends to 0. So immediate effect is that reluctance is tending to 0. So what is the immediate effect of this? That N1 into Im, this particular quantity, tends to 0. So this is some sort of chain you can think of, because flux multiplied by reluctance equals to mmf. Now for an ideal transformer, if you make the assumption that mu r tends to infinity, that is the value of the relative permeability of the magnetic material from which the magnetic core is built up, tends to infinity, that means if mu r tends to infinity, this implies that reluctance tends to 0. If reluctance tends to 0, then obviously this mmf will also tends to 0. So mmf means here actually the magnetizing mmf. Okay, so what can we write? That for an ideal transformer, if you make the assumption mu r tends to infinity, then magnetizing mmf tends to infinity. So this is one conclusion which has not been drawn till now, because we were not making this assumption into force. Now we have taken this assumption into consideration. This thing is coming into the picture, that for an ideal transformer, magnetizing mmf tends to 0. So let us write that. So we have been able to derive at this particular conclusion because of that assumption for an ideal transformer, which says that, let us write it, for an ideal transformer, this is also one added assumption. So for an ideal transformer, for an ideal transformer, we may add another assumption. With where we actually have made four assumption. So let me write with fourth assumption. With our fourth assumption. What was the fourth assumption? That the magnetic core of the transformer will never get saturated. So for an ideal transformer, we may add another assumption with our fourth assumption which we have made. What was that? That mu r tends to infinity. So this thing implies that reluctance tends to 0. Now if reluctance tends to 0, then N1 into Im is nothing but magnetizing MMF. N1 into Im tends to 0. That is magnetizing MMF tends to 0. Now if magnetizing MMF tends to 0, what is magnetizing MMF? N1 into Im, obviously the number of turns of the primary coil P, that is N1. The number of turns of primary coil P, that is N1, it cannot become 0. So only thing can become 0 is Im. So we say that for an ideal transformer, the magnetizing current Im tends to 0. So that is the more appropriate way of saying this. That is the more appropriate way of making the conclusion or saying this, that for an ideal transformer, magnetizing current tends to 0. So we will write this, that for an ideal transformer, Im, that is magnetizing current. So let me write only Im, not I am writing the magnetizing. Im tends to 0, but it is not equal to 0. That is a point which we should keep in mind. Not equal to, but it is not equal to 0. This is a point we should keep in mind very clearly, that for an ideal transformer, magnetizing current Im, tends to 0, but it is not equal to 0. So that means in this particular diagram, we can reduce the value of OA, isn't it? So we can say that OA will tend to 0 in this particular diagram, OA. That means this particular length, isn't it? Now, have we noticed something? Is that an ideal transformer at no load condition, behaves like a pure inductor. How can we say this? It is evident from the phasor diagram only. You see, the current which is drawn by the primary coil P at no load condition is Im, and it is lagging the applied voltage V1 by 90 degree. So this happens in case of an inductor. For an inductor, the current drawn from the supply voltage lags the supply voltage by 90 degree. So the same thing is happening here. We may again have a look here, that the current which is drawn by the primary winding P from the supply voltage at no load condition is how much? Im. So Im is the current drawn by the primary winding from the supply voltage at no load condition, and you see the current Im is lagging the applied voltage V1. Current Im is lagging the applied voltage V1 by how many degrees? 90 degree. So this is what happens in case of an inductor. In case of a pure inductor, the current will lag the supply voltage or the voltage which is applied across the inductor by 90 degree. The current drawn by the inductor, the current drawn by a pure inductor, the current drawn by a pure inductor from the supply voltage will lag by 90 degree. So here Im is lagging the applied voltage V1 by 90 degree, isn't it? So you can say that an ideal transformer at no load condition is equivalent to a pure inductor, because current drawn by the primary winding of an ideal transformer at no load condition is lagging the applied voltage by 90 degree. So we say that. But what is the value of that inductance or say magnetizing reactance? Let us write here so that we can again make out some conclusion which will be helpful for our various MCQ questions which we face in our examination. So what can we rewrite here is that applied voltage V1 can be written as equals to what? Minus J into Xm into Im. This is what is the phasor representation. Because you see, if you want to model this relationship between V1 and Im, you have to take the help of an inductive reactance. Because for an inductive reactance only, which we have learned in our circuit theory, that for an inductive reactance only, the current is lagging the applied voltage by 90 degree. So here the current Im is lagging the applied voltage V1 by 90 degree. So only one element can model this relationship. This relationship, that current is lagging the applied voltage by 90 degree. This particular relationship can be modeled by an inductive reactance only. For an inductive reactance, what we know, that the current drawn from the applied voltage lags by 90 degree. So what is the applied voltage? V1. What is the current drawn by the primary coil? P. Im. So current drawn by the primary coil P is Im and the applied voltage is V1. So obviously Im is lagging the applied voltage V1 by 90 degree as per the phasor diagram. So we can model this thing by an inductive reactance only. So we are modeling this by an inductive reactance which is denoted as Xm. And we call this Xm as the magnetizing reactance. So we are writing this. Why this minus J is there? This minus J is there to indicate that the magnetizing current is lagging the applied voltage by 90 degree. So that's why this minus J is there. Minus J means a lag of 90 degree. Minus J means a lag of 90 degree. So that's why this minus sign is there. A lag of 90 degree is indicated over here. Now you see, as far as the magnitude is concerned, that means let me write considering magnitude only, what can we say? That V1 equals to E1. Let us put a modulus sign so that we are making this meaning that we are considering the magnitude only. So V1 equals to E1. So if that is the case, from this particular equation, what is implied? That Xm, if you consider the magnitude only, is nothing but V1 divided by Im. So what we are assuming, let me write V1. This thing is written only magnitude. Only magnitude is written here. Okay. So we are writing only magnitude. We are only writing only magnitude. Xm equals to V1 by Im. But since from magnitude point of view, from the consideration that we are only taking the magnitude, we can replace V1 by E1. So we can equally write here that Xm is also equal to nothing but Xm equals to nothing but E1 by Im. So E1 by Im. This thing also we can say, isn't it? We can say this. So Xm equals to E1 by Im or Xm equals to V1 by Im. This is because we are saying that the magnitude of V1 and E1 are same. If we consider the magnitude only, if you do not take into account the phase relationship between V1 and E1, we are only considering the magnitude, then Xm equals to E1 by Im, or you can say Xm equals to V1 by Im. Now what we have said just now, that for an ideal transformer, magnetizing current Im will tend to 0. So if magnetizing current Im tends to 0, then Xm will tend to infinity. So we may write there here only. Let us write it, that if we write it over here, because this is a thing which is asked in some of the multiple choice questions or examination, which you may find here, is that, let me rewrite here what we have written here, that Xm is also equals to E1 by Im. This is one way of saying this. Xm equals to E1 by Im. Now what I am saying, for an ideal transformer, magnetizing current Im tends to 0. Therefore, magnetizing reactance Xm tends to infinity. So that is what we are saying. Xm is nothing. What is Xm? Let me write it over here. Xm is magnetizing reactance. Magnetizing reactance of transformer. So Im is the magnetizing current, as said earlier, that Im is the RMS value or the root mean square value of the magnetizing current drawn by the primary winding from the supply voltage. And what is Xm? Xm is the magnetizing reactance of transformer. Further, one may also say, what is Xm? Xm can be written as 2 pi f into Lm. So what is Lm? Obviously Lm is the magnetizing inductance of transformer. So it will be termed as magnetizing inductance. Now we are not writing reactance, we are writing inductance. Magnetizing inductance of transformer. Okay. So this is a very important piece of information from the point of view of circuit theory. If you want to model the transformer by some circuit elements, then one thing you have become sure is that you need a reactance or inductance, whatever you call. So Lm is what? Magnetizing inductance of transformer. So obviously for an ideal transformer, magnetizing inductance Lm will also tend to 0. So this may be written as, or Lm, that is magnetizing inductance Lm will tend to not 0, actually infinity, because reactance is tending to infinity, so inductance will also tending to infinity, because Xm is nothing but 2 pi f Lm. So this is an important conclusion we should keep in our mind, that if you want to compare two transformer, say transformer A and transformer B, so if transformer A is having larger value of magnetizing inductance, that means it will require less value of magnetizing current for the same value of applied voltage. So this is an important point of information. So if transformer B is having less value of magnetizing inductance, then it will require higher value of magnetizing current for the same value of the applied voltage. We are assuming that the voltage rating on the primary side for both transformer A and transformer B are same. So if the voltage rating of the transformer A and transformer B are same, if the voltage rating or the voltage ratio, say V1 by V2 or E1 by E2 if the voltage ratio of the both transformer A and B are same, both are designed for operating at the same frequency, F, let's say F is 50 Hz. So in that case, the transformer which is having larger value of magnetizing reactance or larger value of magnetizing inductance will require less value of magnetizing current, and vice versa. Okay, so let it be up to this. Thank you everybody.